can sneak in a lot of time in those 7 days, right? Kind of sneak it in there. The day-age theory or the gap theory, they say. Well, if you read the text, actually from the text, there's nowhere that you could find in Hebrew where it says and evening and morning, and it enumerates the first day, where that means anything other than a 24-hour day. I mean, you could say one text says a day is as with the Lord is 1,000 years. There's a text that says that. But clearly, that's something we understand. It's communicating. It seems like it looks like 1,000 years to us. It's almost like a day to God. But nowhere does Hebrew text ever say that we can find anywhere where it's saying the first day and it means anything other than like a 24-hour day. And on top of that, it's also as if the writer wanted to be even clearer than that. Evening, and then it's morning, and it's the first day. So I don't know how, if the writer of Genesis was trying to say 24-hour days, what else could he say? I mean, how could he make it any clearer? I don't know what he could say. Oh, and by the way, you guys are going to think that these are day ages, and I'm telling you that the day age theory is not one. These really mean 24-hour days. Well, actually, in that, when it was written, they didn't have hours. Actually, they call it, if you read in the Gospels, it's the first watch of the night, the second watch of the night. They're talking about, it wasn't universally understood. This is a modern concept of hours. We divide things in hours and minutes and stuff. That wasn't even a concept back then. So they couldn't even say 24 hours. So this is the clearest they could possibly even make it to say it's a 24-hour day. So I think it's 24-hour days. If you look at Genesis, and if you look, what day are plants created? Anybody have an idea?
What day he created plants?
What day did he create plants?
Fourth.
Okay, here we go. And verse 9, Genesis 1:9, God said, "Let the waters under the sky come together into one place so the dry land can appear." And that's what happened. God named the dry land earth, and he named and gathered the waters seas. God saw how good it was. God said, "Let the earth grow plant life, plants yielding seeds and fruit-bearing trees with fruit seeds inside it, each according to its kind throughout the earth." And that's what happened. The earth produced plant life, plants yielding seeds, each according to its own kind, and trees bearing fruit and seeds inside it, each according to its kind. God saw how it was good. There was evening and there was morning, the third day. This is day 3. Guess what he does on day 4? What does God do on day 4? God said, "Let there be lights in the dome of the sky to separate the day from the night. They will mark events, sacred seasons, days, and years. They will be lights in the dome of the sky to shine on the earth." Talking about the moon, the sun, the stars. And that's what happened. God made the stars and 2 great lights, the larger to rule over the day and the smaller to rule over the night. God put them in the dome of the sky to shine on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, to separate light from darkness. God saw how good it was. There was evening and there was morning, the 4th day. Well, if these are incredibly long time periods, how do you have plants without a sun and a moon? Plants are before that. Well, you can have plants because God said there's light, so there's light, but there aren't the light bearers. So remember what I said about putting information in? He took the light and he made it into matter by putting information, and he made the sun, moon, and stars. So God did this. He didn't do that by a process that we see operating now, because he's not making sun, moon, and stars. He's not putting information from eternity into time, except for one very important exception. Do you know when he puts information from his mind, eternal mind of God, into space and time? Do you know when he does that? Where he does that? Besides, Jesus sometimes did it. Making water into wine, doing different things that he did. But guess where he does this prominently today? Anybody have any idea? Yes?
Turning dirt into Adam.
What's that?
Turning dirt into Adam.
Training Adam?
Turning
No.
dirt.
Oh, turning dirt into atoms? Yep. Well, that's dirt is atoms. But what I'm thinking about is he makes us a new creation. See, we're spiritually dead, and God the logos, the concept, the idea, the information, the source of all wisdom and knowledge. He puts into us new information. So when we're blind, now we have new information than we see. Now we can't see that visibly. It's not the same thing he did in the very beginning, but it is very profound what he's doing. See, God is a creative, ordering, information-packed being. Okay, anyway, what was the next? Does that answer your question? So I'm going to go into a little bit about the ages and stuff, how we see. When you read in your textbooks or you see on NOVA programs and stuff, they'll always say 100 million years, 20 billion years, 4.5 billion years. Well, how do they know that? It's very interesting because I've talked to some people and they're very, very adamant the universe is 20 billion years old. Well, now it's like 35 billion or something, but yes?
Don't they do that with radioactive data or something?
Yeah, I'll talk about that in a second. So they're so sure they know back to the second of the beginning of the Big Bang 20 billion years ago, but when I ask them, you know there's a lot of eyewitnesses, these eyewitnesses that saw Jesus and saw him die and saw him resurrect, and they'll say, well, that's 2,000 years ago, I don't know if we can trust that, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, but you really know exactly what happened 20 billion years ago? And you don't have anybody to observe it? I mean, does this make any sense? See, the problem is that this is way outside of the realm of human observation. You have nobody to check, no way to falsify or verify. You have no way to calibrate that method or that clock. When I did research at Northrop working on the stealth bomber, if we had an instrument, we would always calibrate it. We'd take it in and it would be calibrated against some standard to know that it was working right, it was measuring what it was measuring really accurately. Well, these so-called clocks, there's no way to validate that they're accurate because you've got nobody to observe and say, yep, right you are. This 1 billion years ago we observed this. Yep, that clock's working right. You have no way to observe it. And the problem is that you have to make a lot of assumptions in order to have these methods come up with these numbers. So for example, the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, they say. You know how they determined that? They didn't really actually determine that by the Earth, but by asteroids that have hit the Earth, and a number of asteroids that have hit the Earth. They believe the asteroids are the same age as the Earth because they started when the solar system started and the Earth started when the solar system started. So they date the asteroids, and they say there's uranium and there's lead in them, and half of the uranium and lead, half is lead, half is uranium, so they're equal amounts. And they calculate the decay rate of uranium that goes into lead. The decay rate of uranium to lead is, guess how much? Half the time. If you have uranium, half the uranium will decay into lead in how long? Guess how long? 4.5 billion years. So you got 50-50. It must be 4.5 billion years old because it couldn't have had any lead in the beginning. It had to be pure uranium. Well, how do you know it was pure uranium in the beginning? That's a pretty big assumption. You have to know the concentrations at the beginning in order to really make the calculation. And they don't tell you that. And that's true with every radioactive dating method, by the way. Carbon-14, somebody was asking about, I won't go into that, it's a little more complicated, but Carbon-14, the inventor of the method, who won the Nobel Prize, said it's not good for more than, say, about 3,000 years. Because the half-life of Carbon-14 is only about 1,760 years, and you only got a quarter of it, and it's such a small amount, and it's so overwhelmed by error and other factors that you can't date more than, say, 3,000 years with Carbon-14. So it's good for maybe artifacts, like you find wood from a boat or something you could date with Carbon-14, but it's not good for anything beyond that. But these other methods are really, you're making some big assumptions that nobody can validate or prove. Does that help answer your question?
I just wanted to know where you stood on.
Yeah. So I don't think, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I know other people too. There really is nothing. There is nothing that that really disproves the Bible. There's nothing clear, convincing to say the Bible is wrong about these things. If you just take the natural reading, there's no reason really to doubt it. And many of these methods, by the way, there's a lot of dating methods. There's about 90 or 100 different methods of dating how old the universe is, how old the solar system is, how old the Earth is, and about 90% of them give young ages. They just pick the old ones. So for example, the moon is, as it circles the Earth, is moving further and further away from the Earth. It's sort of moving away every cycle, just a little bit, not much. I don't know whether it's a couple of millimeters or whatever, but if you calculate, the moon couldn't possibly have been doing this for more than, say, 100,000 years. So how does that fit with the 4.5 billion? It doesn't. By the way, when they landed on the moon, they had these great big pads on the lunar lander. You ever see that lunar lander? Had these big circular pads landing on the moon when the guys landed on the moon, because they were afraid, they thought that the thing would just sink way in. They had to protect from the thing sinking into the moon because it would be covered with dust that would be many, many feet deep. And that's because they know interstellar dust, there's so much dust going around out there to be striking the moon, it'd have to be, if it's really old, it's gonna have to be real deep. Well, when they landed on the moon, they only had like a little bit, and like they had an inch of dust. And you see the guys out there with their footprints, you know, there's like an inch of dust. They scratch their heads, well, I guess we don't really know why we only got a little bit of dust. Maybe it's not that old. So there's a lot of different methods. Comets, by the way, is another one. The comets, anybody ever see a comet? It's pretty cool to see a comet. But you see that big tail going off the comet? These comets come around every so many years. Halley's Comet comes around like, I don't know, 86 years. Some of them come around shorter time. But these short period comets, when they come around the sun, what actually happens is the sun's blasting out energy and particles, and it knocks off debris off the comet. So it knocks off ice and dust off the comet.